That second question is throwing me off.
Yeah, that's one thing I was going to say.
It's something I've thought about very deeply.
That
Okay.
second question?
Yeah.
Well,
I'm confused a bit.
Okay. Do you want me to explain it?
Yes.
Okay. We all have potential for that great evil, and we all have potential for great good.
Okay. So the potential of it, is that different? Okay.
Because you know, you think about what Jesus said, right? About the stone.
who cast the first stone, is without sin. That one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Powerful. But the meaning of that is everybody in this world is the same. When you read about great evil, say.
Do you read about great evil a lot?
All the time.
It's in the e-book.
When you read about great evil, you are reading about yourself. That's what I've learned.
Okay.
You're reading about what you could be, and you could go in either direction.
Yeah.
It's east of Eden.
Uh-huh.
It's east of Eden.
Right. Okay.
Here's
So,
a new thing that
the
we'll do
potential.
too.
Yeah.
Is everybody has to understand the prompt.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we will ask both people. I think that's a good thing, Marco.
But you can disagree with what I just said in your argument. Don't think you have to agree with it.
Oh no, yeah, of course. Yeah.
But
You
Marco,
guys can also take
I think
notes.
one thing we should do is we should
Oh, yeah.
ask both people, do you fully understand the prompt?
Yeah, I
because there's
think
been
that's a good
times
idea.
where it's like there's
Then,
been
like, wait a minute,
misunderstanding,
yeah.
and then it's like, then it's on them. If Tony
Yeah.
doesn't get it, and he's just like, it's like,
Stupid.
okay,
But
that was
sometimes
I
you
think
think
that's
you
good.
get it too,
Sometimes
and then
you do.
then it clicks halfway through, and you're like, we're arguing different points.
Maybe,
That's true,
Maybe
that's true.
At the beginning, before they start, we have whoever wrote it explain what it means,
That's
right,
good.
and
just
then,
as a default.
That's
yeah,
good.
and then
then
if there's any
questions.
further, yeah, exactly. If there's any further,
I like
questions.
that. I like
All
that
right,
a lot.
Does the
good.
court have
Is there
any
any
further
further questions?
I don't think so.
We'll set it in sync.
I think I'm ready.
All right.
All right,
Start
guys.
Time in 3, 2.
Okay, so I believe that Christopher Columbus is a bad and evil man, primarily because he, took over this land that wasn't his and claimed it to be his, and in doing so caused a lot of chaos.
20 seconds. Nice.
How many seconds?
Nice and
20.
brief. Keeping it brief.
Should it be brief or?
It's up to you.
Tony,
Doesn't have
You
to.
want to refine it? You want
What's
to broaden
the-
it? It's up to you.
What's the limit on opening statement?
2 minutes.
Yeah.
8
2
years.
minutes.
Tony, just
Most,
got plenty
most
of
are
time, man.
longer. Most are longer.
if you feel
I like to
you've
keep it
been
brief.
efficient in 10 seconds, then do
Yeah.
10. If you feel like you've been efficient in 2, do 2.
My thought process is always I want to get to the main.
That's the funner part.
That's
yeah.
That's my logic. That's why I keep it brief.
It's just your opening statement.
Or you can
do
tell
fine.
stories like I do, like talking about a convenience store at like 11 p.m. looking for some Twinkies.
That's right.
Speaking
do
to
it.
Good at talking stories, yeah.
Yeah. All right,
Ready?
Tony.
Ready?
Let's hear your opening statement.
I think Christopher Columbus was not so bad, maybe a little misunderstood. Simple as that.
All right.
Even briefer.
5 seconds.
Wow.
Really? Wow.
That's
a record.
impressive. That's impressive.
That is a record.
We gotta write that
is
down.
a record. 5 seconds.
5-second opening statement.
I'm just waiting for that 1 second opening statement.
Just
Person bad.
So, shall we begin?
Yeah.
Michelle, all right.
Okay.
Well, we should explain to Tony how it works.
Yeah. So essentially, it's just like a conversation from this point on, and we go for 10 minutes. Is that
Yeah.
max?
Yeah.
We
we go for
can.
10.
We don't have to go for 10, but that's the max. And it's essentially just a back and forth. Not an argument, but a debate.
Sometimes the timer stops, and
Yeah.
the conversation doesn't.
He's always laughing.
Get out of here, man.
Something I will say when it comes to the timer, once we get to about 9 minutes, 8 minutes 30 seconds, then
no
9
warning.
minutes, then
Yeah.
9:30.
Cool.
Yeah.
I like that.
I'll warn you guys, just so you guys.
Works with me.
What is he laughing about, Tony?
Just a silly
Stop
goose.
Okay. So,
Let me know when you guys are ready.
yeah.
All right.
First, I would like to ask you, what would you, because I'm curious to get in the mind, what would you define as evil?
Someone who just does not have like any connections to anybody, like just in it for him or herself, and willing to
Selfish
throw
reasons?
exactly
Okay.
selfish and willing to throw anybody under the bus at any given
Gotcha.
moment.
Okay, so
Like, doesn't feel love or anything.
So based on that, I think that's a prime example of Christopher Columbus, because he clearly didn't care for the people who were living here before they came and conquered America. And this, I would argue that in doing so, not taking it over, calling it their own, is a very selfish act. And I feel like that alone would be under that definition of evil. Anything about that?
Yeah, so one thing about that you have to consider is he didn't just one day decide to wake up, travel across the Atlantic and go to America. He was called upon by his nation to do so. So sure, like when he went there, you know, no one's disagreeing that he did some pretty awful things, but you have to consider, like, why did he do that? I think that was for the love of his nation, his people, his king.
But it was ultimately his choice to do those acts, correct?
That is true.
He was called upon, but that doesn't necessarily mean he had to, you know, practically eradicate a lot of American Indians. I would argue that's a choice. He could have chosen, hey, this land is taken, they live here. It was founded by him, found, quite literally, like, that it would be stealing if you, like, not even giving credit, if this was a credit thing, but ultimately I would argue that was his choice, and thus that makes him evil.
I think for one thing to consider is, you know, he's coming from Europe, and the whole thing with Europe, especially at that time, is conquest is, like, you know, a big part of, like, every European society, regardless if it's west, south, north, east. So a big part of their whole lifestyle and culture is conquest. So to him, his view is, you know, if he goes to America, if he has to take it through force, you know, it's not really like much of a choice. It's more like, you know, he's set on that path, like, that's what I'm doing. That, yeah, he made his choice to do that, but I think ultimately he just I think he was just very set
Follow
on
tradition.
Like, follow tradition, yeah, like the whole culture of conquest.
So would then that equate to the culture itself is not evil or is evil? Would that mean this tradition is inherently flawed? Because I personally would say that. Just because something is tradition doesn't make it right. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, because some cultures and traditions, you know, some people may view it as, you know, some parts of it are evil, if not the whole thing. And for him, obviously, when he's growing up, he's not going to think that's evil because that's all he knows.
True.
So in his mindset, you know, it's just a natural thing. It's just what he was taught.
Yeah. So, okay. So it was born into him. So, can you say it one more time? I had something and then I lost it.
So it's basically just like, you know, he's born into that culture of like being taught, you know, strength, conquest, do whatever you have to do to win. And that's a big thing for European cultures at that time.
Gotcha. So ultimately, I guess that kind of goes back to then, what is evil? Is evil a perception? Is it a, like, set in stone law? I guess that's fairly hard to define. So do you have any say on that?
I feel like my gut tells me it's more of a perception.
Yeah.
But then, you know, you think of other things, like, I'd have to imagine most people would think, you know, some of the stuff that, you know, he actually did, like murder and stuff, is pretty evil.
Yeah.
But you have to consider, you know, again, he went over there, but then you also wonder, because I'm not trying to claim I'm like a historian, especially with that kind of history. But I know a lot of the tribes at that time were like at war with each other.
Gotcha. Okay.
So maybe he didn't really think it was a big deal if he just put himself in the mix, go to war with some of them.
Interesting. Well, there's a lot back there. So going back to the original question though, of is it perception or a set in stone thing, you agree that it's perception. So I would argue that in modern times, we have a different perception as we did back then. So under today's modern lens, I think it is fair to argue that in current times, it is decent to look at it as an evil act, and thus shouldn't be regarded as a highly figure, because under modern terms, that would be classified as evil if it is a perception.
Are we talking about like in modern times people would view murder as evil, or just like certain cultures, or
I guess
what did you mean?
I guess it depends on the culture as well. I guess I would say in modern times U.S. Because if we're talking about perception, that means the perception of evil would not be universal. So I think it is a fair claim to. I think it's a fair claim to go either way, honestly. But I think it's fair to say that he is evil based on our society's current views.
I would agree that, you know, based on current views, like most people would agree was not the best of men, but at his time he was, you know, definitely hailed as a hero. So I guess in his mind he definitely was not a bad guy. But then you also, going back to the original question of asking us if he was a bad man or evil, I'd probably if, you know, trying to take the viewpoint of like defending him is kind of difficult, but
Yeah,
I
because
probably
I understand you're not necessarily
yeah.
defending him.
I'd probably have to argue something like no, he was, in his time it was different, but also that if I somehow had to defend him today, I'd probably say something along the lines of, you know, in the situation he was in against, like, you know, a bunch of warring tribes, I can't imagine he went there and like was welcomed with open arms. Maybe he was, again, I'm not a historian, so
So if they were actively at war,
he probably figured
then does that make him any different than
I would
people there?
I'd probably say no, he wasn't any different, because he's putting himself into that mix thinking if they're already at war with each other, I might as well do it better than them and just slaughter them all.
I could see that as like it's an equal playing field, but I would argue he might be different. He probably is different since he almost inserted himself into the situation. Not to make it in modern terms, but almost like the Vietnam War, which is funny to think the U.S. But anyways, I would argue, or I think people could argue, and I would argue that Vietnam War was fairly an evil act for us to join in on. I would argue that would make for not being necessarily needing to do it, the choice of joining this warfare that did not involve him would make him evil and different than the people who were living there beforehand. He wasn't living there beforehand, so that wouldn't make it his land.
I think with the whole Vietnam thing too, kind of going back to what I was talking about earlier, maybe like the whole thing was like, you know, I'm doing this for my country. You know, the U.S. believed that, you know, we have to stop communism in Vietnam, thus we have to put troops in there, you know, go into a big bloody war. So maybe for Christopher Columbus, like I said, you know, going over to America, you have to slaughter a bunch of natives, it's for the country.
But wouldn't that be... I would still argue, though, that I would go back to saying, does the tradition of nationalism, would that be evil, since it's for this flawed system, I would argue. Would that be the case?
I would have to wonder, like, again, from his point of view, you know, to him, he's not doing any evil. So I would agree, though, you know, definitely what he did, not good.
Would you argue... you beat me to it. I was going to say, would you argue any of what he did was good?
Oh, no. But I'm trying to take the, you know, point of defending him, though.
Yeah.
But I just have to say, I'm trying to think how to put it into words. Like, if you love something, how far are you willing to go to defend it, or how much are you willing to do to show you love it? And I think he went to the extreme.
I think that's sort of flawed, because I could be in a store. I love that basket. That is a beautiful basket. That one day I want that to be mine. I steal it. I guess for the sake of the argument, I kill the cashiers. I'm gonna cut that out. I steal the basket. Does that make it mine? And thus, would that be an evil act? Stealing.
I would have to say it's pretty evil to just steal, but then a whole thing with, you know, going over to America was, you know, there was a lot of famines in Europe at that time, so it's like, oh, we need more land, living space, the whole thing.
But
so it's like, if you had to steal food for your family at that store, would it be an evil thing? Like if you had no money, nothing, and you had to go into that store and steal food for your family.
well, I would argue it is, but as you just said, because correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you said stealing would be evil. Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, I was thinking more in the sense of like, if you just went in there because you like that basket, you want that basket, you take it. But would it be evil to go in there if you had to feed your family?
I see what you're
and
saying.
like just
If
take a
your
bag of chips or whatever?
intentions are good,
Yeah,
then does that make it evil?
exactly. Yeah.
I guess you could be well-intentioned but poorly execute things, and I think in the midst of the execution, you can inherit more evil. I'm just curious, what are we on time? Are we over?
Yeah, but it's a
Okay.
good conversation.
I was gonna say, I was like, I remember the 8:50, and I was like,
Yeah, no,
what's happening over here? So you guys don't mind if we keep going?
Yeah, of course.
I have
This
to
is
make a
great.
phone call, but
Go
have
ahead.
fun.
Go ahead. What did I just say? I
Um,
lost my train of thought.
is it evil?
I forgot what I said.
Is it evil if you have the right intentions or
Yes,
something?
that's what it was. So, would you argue then it is not evil if you have good intentions but do evil acts? Just because your intention is good, does that quote unquote like forgive or abide or not abide or like what's the word? Pardon. Does that pardon the evil then if your intentions are good?
This situation.
The
Columbus.
Columbus.
Yeah.
Columbus.
Does it pardon Columbus?
I want to say no, but it's like I can't think of any points to like defend him, you know? Because I think the overall thing of like, is it evil if you do it for good reason? I think that varies by situation. Like the convenience store scenario we talked about, I personally think it would be okay. Columbus, though, it's like I can't really defend the man. Yeah, that's all I got. I can't really defend him much further, honestly.
Not much further?
Going in circles.
Okay.
I guess that's the end of the debate.
This is the finish.
This is the finish.
So,
Well done. Well done. You did great.
Thank you. Did you?
wow, this is a good one.
That was a good one.
Guys, I have a question.
Yes.
How much do both of you know about Christopher Columbus?
Not much at all.
I know like a little bit.
I know that he found America and conquered it. That's pretty much it. I mean, like I've learned a lot about it in school. Do I remember any of it? Not really.
Not do I.
Ignore the Vikings who were before him and ignore the natives too, but he found it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.